The rain had no mercy that afternoon, much like the memories that haunted Eric Vincent as his black Mercedes pulled up to St. Mary's Cathedral. Through the tinted window, he watched umbrellas bob like dark flowers in a sea of mourning. His driver glanced at him through the rearview mirror, waiting for the signal to open the door, but Eric remained frozen. His hand gripped his phone, the message still glowing on the screen: Thomas Barnett passed away. Funeral today at 2 p.m. Thomas Barnett. The name alone sent a tremor through his chest. 5 years. It had been 5 years since he'd heard anything about the Barnett family. 5 years since he'd forced himself to stop searching for news about her. And now, here he was, about to walk into the place where it all began, and where it all ended. "Sir." His driver prompted gently. Eric straightened his tie and stepped out into the rain. The cathedral loomed before him, its Gothic spires piercing the gray sky. Each step up the stone stairs felt heavier than the last. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of lilies and old wood, and the low murmur of grief filled the space. He slipped into a pew at the back, his tailored suit drawing a few curious glances. The billionaire tech mogul. The self-made man. The heartless bastard who abandoned love for fortune. At least, that's what the headlines would say if they knew the truth. His eyes scanned the crowd, and then, there. Time stopped. She stood near the front, her black dress simple and elegant, her chestnut hair pulled back in a way that revealed the graceful curve of her neck. Even from this distance, even with her shoulders trembling with silent sobs, she was breathtaking. Stephanie Barnett. The only woman he'd ever loved. The only woman who'd ever made him feel like he was worth something beyond his bank account. As if sensing his presence, she turned slightly, and for one heart-stopping moment, their eyes met across the crowded cathedral. Her face went pale. Her hand flew to her mouth. Recognition, shock, and something darker, something like betrayal, flashed across her features before she quickly looked away. Eric's jaw clenched. She still hated him. After all these years, she still believed the lie. The lie he'd told to set her free. But as the priest began the eulogy and Eric watched Stephanie crumble under the weight of her grief, he knew one thing with absolute certainty: he couldn't leave this town without telling her the truth. Even if it destroyed him. Even if she never forgave him. Because Thomas Barnett had been more than her father. He'd been the man who'd made Eric promise to break Stephanie's heart, and Eric had kept that promise, not knowing the devastating secret that would haunt them both. What do you think Eric sacrificed when he walked away? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. The reception was held at the Bennett estate, a sprawling manor that Eric remembered all too well. He'd spent countless evenings here once, laughing with Stephanie on the veranda, stealing kisses in the garden, planning a future that would never come. Now, he stood among strangers in the very place where his heart had been both made and broken. He kept his distance, watching Stephanie move through the crowd with practiced grace despite her red-rimmed eyes. She accepted condolences, embraced distant relatives, and maintained the composure expected of Thomas Barnett's only daughter. But Eric could see the cracks in her armor, the way her smile never reached her eyes, the tremor in her hands when she thought no one was looking. Eric Vincent. The voice behind him was sharp, laced with venom. He turned to find Carol Reed, Stephanie's best friend, glaring at him with undisguised contempt. Her arms were crossed, her expression glacial. "Carol," he acknowledged quietly. "You have some nerve showing up here." Her voice was low but fierce. "After what you did to her. After you destroyed her." Eric's throat tightened. "I came to pay my respects." "Respects?" Carol laughed bitterly. "You don't get to do that. You don't get to waltz back into her life on the worst day she's ever had and pretend you care." "I never stopped caring." "Then why did you leave her?" Carol stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "Why did you tell her you never loved her? That she was just a distraction? Do you have any idea what that did to her?" Each word was a knife to his chest. "You don't understand. No, you don't understand. She waited for you. Even after you shattered her heart, she waited. She turned down every man who tried to date her because some stupid part of her thought you'd come back. And you never did. Before Eric could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. A man had arrived, tall, silver-haired, impeccably dressed. Anthony Richardson, CEO of Richardson Pharmaceuticals and one of the most powerful men on the East Coast. He moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding rooms. Eric's blood ran cold when he saw Anthony approach Stephanie. The older man took her hand, murmured something in her ear, and she nodded with a weak smile. "Who is that?" Eric heard himself ask. Carol's expression shifted to something like pity. "You really don't know? That's Anthony Richardson. He's been courting Stephanie for the past 6 months. Her father approved of the match before he died." The words hit Eric like a physical blow. "A match? They're engaged, Eric. The announcement was supposed to be made next month." Carol's voice softened slightly. "Let her go. She's finally moving on. Don't ruin this for her." But as Eric watched Anthony Richardson place a possessive hand on Stephanie's lower back, something felt wrong. The way Stephanie stiffened at the touch. The way her smile seemed more like a mask than genuine happiness. He knew that look. He'd seen it before, on the night Thomas Barnett had summoned him to his study 5 years ago. The memory came flooding back with brutal clarity. Eric had arrived at the Bennett estate with a ring in his pocket and hope in his heart. He was going to ask Thomas for permission to marry Stephanie that night. They'd been dating for 2 years, and Eric had finally sold his first tech startup for enough money to prove he could provide for her. But the moment he entered Thomas Barnett's study, he knew something was terribly wrong. The older man sat behind his mahogany desk, his face ashen, his hands trembling as they held a medical report. "Mr. Barnett?" Eric had asked, concern flooding through him. "Are you all right?" Thomas looked up, and Eric saw fear in his eyes. Raw, desperate fear. "Sit down, son. We need to talk." What Thomas revealed that night changed everything. The experimental treatment. The massive debt to dangerous people, people who'd given Thomas a choice, secure his daughter's future, or watch everything crumble. "Anthony Richardson has agreed to forgive the debt," Thomas had said, his voice breaking. "All of it. Millions of dollars. But he wants Stephanie. Not now, he knows she loves you. But eventually." "You can't be serious," Eric had protested. "You can't sell your daughter." "I'm dying, Eric." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. 6 months. Maybe a year if the treatment works. And when I'm gone, those men will come for her. They'll use her to get to me, to my assets, to everything I've built. Unless she's under Richardson's protection. There has to be another way. There isn't. Thomas stood, his eyes pleading. "I need you to let her go. I need you to break her heart so completely that when I'm gone and Richardson makes his move, she'll be ready to accept him. If she still loves you, she'll wait. She'll refuse him. And those men will destroy her." "I won't do it," Eric had said. "I love her." "Then prove it." Thomas's voice cracked. "Prove you love her by setting her free. By protecting her the only way we can. Richardson is a good man. He'll take care of her. He'll keep her safe." The memory burned like acid in Eric's mind as he stood in the present, watching Stephanie with the man who was supposed to save her. But something had changed. Thomas had lived, much longer than 6 months. The treatment had worked. So why was Stephanie still trapped in this arrangement? Eric's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, Garden. 10 minutes. Come alone. He glanced up to find Stephanie staring at him from across the room, her phone in her hand. Their eyes locked. She gave the slightest nod before turning and slipping through the French doors. Eric's heart hammered as he waited the agonizing 10 minutes, then followed. The garden was exactly as he remembered it, rose bushes, a stone fountain, the wrought iron bench where they'd shared their first kiss. But now it was overgrown, neglected, as if no one had cared for it in years. Stephanie stood by the fountain, her back to him, her shoulders rigid. "You shouldn't have come," she said without turning around. "Your father." "My father is dead, Eric. Whatever obligation you felt to him died with him." Her voice was cold, controlled. "You're free to go." He stepped closer. "Stephanie, please. Let me explain." She whirled around, and the fury in her eyes stopped him cold. "Explain what?" "How you told me you loved me one day and then destroyed me the next. How you said I was just a pleasant distraction while you built your empire." Tears streamed down her face. "Do you know what that did to me?" "I lied," he said desperately. "Everything I said that night was a lie. Your father made me. Don't you dare blame him." She advanced on him, her finger jabbing into his chest. "My father loved me. He would never. He was protecting you." Eric grabbed her shoulders. "He was dying, Stephanie. He had 6 months to live and debts to people who would have hurt you. Richardson offered to make it all go away if you married him. Your father made me promise to break your heart so you'd be free to accept Richardson when the time came." Stephanie froze, her face draining of color. "What?" "He was trying to save you. We both were." She jerked away from him, shaking her head. "No. No, that's impossible. My father's treatment worked. He lived for 5 more years." "I know." Eric's voice cracked. "I didn't know that would happen. I thought I was losing you to save you. I thought your father would die and you'd be safe with Richardson and I'd have to live with the fact that you hated me, but at least you'd be alive and protected." The silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of rain beginning to fall again. "If that's true," Stephanie whispered, "then why didn't you come back? When my father survived, when the danger passed, why didn't you tell me?" "Because by then you'd moved on. Or so I thought. I heard you were doing well, building your own life. I thought I'd done enough damage." He took a shaky breath. "And because I'm a coward. I was terrified you'd never forgive me. Do you think Stephanie should forgive Eric, or is some betrayal too deep to overcome? Let us know what you'd do." Stephanie sank onto the bench, her head in her hands. When she finally looked up, her expression was devastated. "Eric, I need to tell you something. About Anthony. About why I'm really marrying him." But before she could continue, a voice cut through the rain. "So this is where you've been hiding." Anthony Richardson emerged from the shadows, his expression pleasant but his eyes cold. "Stephanie, darling, our guests are wondering where you've gone." He turned to Eric with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Vincent. I've heard so much about you." Eric stepped protectively closer to Stephanie. "We were just talking." "Of course. Old friends catching up." Anthony's hand settled on Stephanie's shoulder, and Eric saw her flinch. "But I'm afraid I must steal my fiancé away. We have an announcement to make." "Anthony, please, not tonight," Stephanie began. "Your father would have wanted it," Anthony said smoothly. "A beacon of hope on this dark day. He told me himself, he wanted to see you settled before he passed. Now come." It wasn't a request. As Anthony led Stephanie back toward the house, she looked over her shoulder at Eric, her eyes filled with desperation and something else, a silent plea for help. And in that moment, Eric realized the truth. Stephanie wasn't marrying Anthony Richardson because she'd moved on. She was marrying him because she had no choice. The question was, why? Eric couldn't let it end like this. Not again. He spent the next hour making calls, pulling strings, activating networks he'd built over 5 years of ruthless business dealing. If Anthony Richardson had leverage over Stephanie, Eric would find it. The answer came at midnight from Campbell George, his former business partner and current private investigator. "You're not going to like this, Eric," Campbell's voice crackled through the phone. "Richardson Pharmaceuticals is in trouble. Massive trouble. They've been falsifying clinical trial data for years. If it gets out, the company collapses and Richardson goes to prison." "What does this have to do with Stephanie?" Thomas Barnett was the FDA inspector who discovered the fraud, 6 months before he died. Richardson found out. He's been blackmailing the family ever since. Eric's blood turned to ice. Blackmailing them how? He threatened to frame Thomas for accepting bribes to cover up the data. Posthumous charges would destroy the Barnett name, invalidate Thomas's entire career, force them to return every pension dollar. Stephanie would lose everything, the house, her father's reputation, her inheritance. All of it. And the only way to stop him is for her to marry him and sign a prenuptial agreement that includes an NDA. She can never speak about what her father discovered. In exchange, Richardson protects the Barnett legacy. Eric's hands shook with rage. Thomas didn't die of natural causes, did he? The pause on the other end told him everything. The treatment was working, Campbell said quietly. Until it wasn't. I found irregularities in his final medical records. Nothing provable, but Richardson had access. He was a family friend. Murder. Anthony Richardson had murdered Thomas Barnett and was now forcing his daughter to marry him to cover it up. Eric was out the door before Campbell could say another word. He found Stephanie on the estate's rooftop terrace, the place where they used to watch the stars, where he'd first told her he loved her. She stood at the railing, still in her black dress, the city lights spread out below her like fallen stars. "I know about Richardson," Eric said. She didn't turn around. "Then you know why I have to marry him." "You don't." "I do." Her voice was hollow. "If I don't, everything my father worked for disappears. His name becomes synonymous with corruption. Every inspection he ever made gets questioned. Lives could be at risk if medications get recalled because people think he was dirty." She finally faced him, tears streaming down her face. "I can't let that happen. It's the only thing I have left of him, his legacy." "Stephanie, Richardson killed your father." She didn't look surprised. She looked destroyed. "I know," she whispered. "I've known for 3 months. I found evidence in my father's files. But I can't prove it. And if I try, Richardson will release the falsified documents that prove my father was corrupt. Even if I'm right, my father's name still gets dragged through the mud during the investigation." Eric crossed to her, his heart breaking. "So you're going to sacrifice yourself? Marry your father's murderer? What choice do I have?" She gripped the railing. "At least this way, one of us survives. At least my father's legacy stays intact. There's always a choice." Eric took her face in his hands, forcing her to look at him. "I lost you once because I thought I was protecting you. I won't make that mistake again. We're going to bring Richardson down. Together. Eric, he's too powerful. So am I." A fierce determination settled over him. "I didn't build an empire by playing it safe. Trust me. One more time. Give me 48 hours. Stephanie searched his eyes, and for the first time in 5 years, she saw hope flicker there. "What are you going to do?" "What I should have done 5 years ago." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Fight for you." The next 48 hours were a blur of strategy, alliances, and calculated risks. Eric contacted Virginia Dean, a federal prosecutor who owed him a favor. He reached out to Cynthia Andrews, an investigative journalist who'd been trying to expose Richardson for years. He called in every debt, activated every resource, and built a case that even Richardson's lawyers couldn't deflect. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Juanita Jackson, Thomas Barnett's former assistant, had kept everything, every memo, every email, every piece of evidence Thomas had gathered about Richardson's fraud. She'd been too terrified to come forward alone, but with Eric's protection and resources, she was ready to testify. The morning of Stephanie's scheduled engagement announcement, Eric arrived at the Bennett estate with Virginia Dean, 2 FBI agents, and a warrant for Anthony Richardson's arrest. Stephanie stood in the foyer, dressed for the press conference that would never happen. When she saw Eric, relief and disbelief warred on her face. "It's over," Eric said simply. Richardson emerged from the study, his smile faltering when he saw the federal agents. "What is the meaning of this?" "Anthony Richardson, you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, and suspicion of murder in the death of Thomas Barnett," Virginia Dean announced, her voice ringing with authority. The color drained from Richardson's face. "You can't prove." "We have everything," Eric cut him off. "Juanita Jackson kept all your communications. The falsified trial data. The threats. The emails where you discussed handling the Thomas Barnett problem. It's over." As the agents handcuffed Richardson, he shot a venomous look at Stephanie. "You'll regret this. Your father's reputation will be restored." Cynthia Andrews stepped forward, her recording device in hand. "Along with the reputations of everyone who suffered because of your fraud. Thomas Barnett was a hero. And the world is about to know it." Richardson was led away in handcuffs, still protesting, still threatening. But his power was broken. The moment the door closed behind them, Stephanie's knees buckled. Eric caught her, holding her as 5 years of pain, fear, and grief poured out in racking sobs. "It's over," he murmured into her hair. "You're free. He can never hurt you again." 1 month later, the garden had been restored. Eric had hired the best landscapers in the state to bring it back to life, to make it the way Stephanie remembered from before everything went wrong. Roses bloomed in vibrant reds and pinks. The fountain sparkled in the afternoon sun. And on the wrought iron bench, 2 people sat hand in hand. "Richardson got 25 years, Stephanie said, her head resting on Eric's shoulder. Virginia said with all the charges, he'll never see the outside of a prison cell. "Good." Eric pressed a kiss to her temple. "Your father's legacy is secure. The FDA named an award after him for ethical inspection practices. He would have loved that." She smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen in weeks. "Thank you. For not giving up. For fighting when I couldn't. I should have fought 5 years ago." Eric turned to face her, taking both her hands. "I should have told your father there had to be another way. I should have trusted us enough to find it together. You were trying to protect me. And I lost you. I lost 5 years we could have spent together." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box, the same one he'd carried that night 5 years ago. "I'm not making that mistake again." Stephanie's breath caught as he opened it, revealing a simple diamond ring that caught the sunlight. "I bought this the day before your father called me to his study," Eric said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've carried it ever since. A reminder of what I gave up. What I lost." He slid off the bench, kneeling in the grass before her. "Stephanie Barnett, I have loved you from the moment I met you. I loved you when I had to walk away. I loved you every day we were apart. And I will love you for every day we have left. Marry me. Not out of obligation or protection, but because you want to. Because we choose each other." Tears streamed down Stephanie's face, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." As Eric slipped the ring onto her finger and pulled her into his arms, kissing her with 5 years of longing and love, the past finally released its grip on them both. They'd been broken. They'd been lost. They'd been forced apart by secrets and lies and impossible choices. But love, real love, had brought them back together. And this time, nothing would tear them apart. 6 months later, the wedding was small, intimate, just close friends and family in the restored garden where it all began. Carol Reed stood as maid of honor, tears of happiness streaming down her face. Campbell George served as best man, grinning at the couple who'd finally found their way back to each other. As Stephanie and Eric exchanged vows under an arch of white roses, they spoke of second chances and hard-won forgiveness. They spoke of trust built from ashes and love that refused to die. And when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the kiss they shared held the promise of all the tomorrows they'd nearly lost. What's the most powerful second chance story you've ever witnessed? Share your story in the comments, we'd love to hear it. 2 years after their wedding, Eric and Stephanie stood once again in the garden, but this time they weren't alone. A little girl with chestnut hair and her father's determined eyes toddled between the rose bushes, laughing as she chased butterflies. "Emma, be careful," Stephanie called out, her hand resting on her rounded belly. Their second child would arrive in 3 months. Eric wrapped his arms around his wife from behind, his hands settling over hers. "She's fearless. Just like her mother." Stephanie leaned back against him, watching their daughter with a smile. "I was thinking about my father today. About how he'd have loved to meet her. He'd be proud of you," Eric said softly. "Of the woman you've become. Of how you fought for the truth." The Thomas Barnett Foundation for Medical Ethics had become one of the most respected organizations in healthcare oversight. Stephanie had channeled her pain into purpose, ensuring that no other families would suffer from pharmaceutical fraud the way so many had under Richardson's regime. Eric had also made changes. His tech empire now focused on developing transparent clinical trial software, tools that made it nearly impossible to falsify medical data. Together, they'd turned their tragedy into a legacy that saved lives. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come to the funeral that day?" Stephanie asked. Eric tightened his embrace. "Every day. And every day I'm grateful I found the courage to face you. To face the truth. I'm glad you did too." She turned in his arms, looking up at him with eyes full of love. "Because I learned something important through all of this." "What's that?" "That real love isn't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. It's about choosing each other, even when everything is falling apart. It's about fighting for each other when giving up would be easier." She touched his face tenderly. "You chose me, Eric. Not once, but twice. First when you walked away to protect me, and then when you came back to fight for me." He kissed her forehead. "I'll choose you every single day for the rest of my life." Emma ran up to them, her small hands full of rose petals. "Mama. Dada. Pretty." They knelt down together, and Eric lifted their daughter into his arms. As the three of them stood there in the garden, soon to be 4, with the setting sun painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Eric realized that some endings are really just beginnings in disguise. He'd walked into that cathedral 5 years ago thinking he'd lost Stephanie forever. He believed that the past was an inescapable prison, that some mistakes could never be undone, that broken hearts stayed broken. But he'd been wrong. The past he couldn't escape had led him to the future he'd always dreamed of. The love he thought he'd destroyed had survived, grown stronger, and blossomed into something more beautiful than he could have imagined. Sometimes the hardest part isn't letting go, it's holding on when everything tells you to give up. What's the biggest obstacle you've overcome for love? Have you ever had to fight for a second chance? Let us know in the comments. There's always hope, even in the darkest moments. Sometimes the greatest love stories aren't about finding the right person, they're about fighting for them when everything seems lost. They're about forgiveness when forgiveness seems impossible. They're about second chances when you think you've run out of chances. Eric and Stephanie's story reminds us that love isn't just a feeling, it's a choice, a commitment, a battle worth fighting. It's about standing up against impossible odds, about refusing to let fear dictate your future, about believing that even the most broken things can be made whole again. If you're going through a difficult time, if you're facing impossible choices, if you're wondering whether love is worth the pain, remember this: the past may haunt us, but it doesn't have to define us. We can choose differently. We can fight harder. We can love deeper. And sometimes, just sometimes, the past we can't escape becomes the future we were always meant to have. Thank you so much for experiencing this emotional journey with Eric and Stephanie. If this story touched your heart, resonated with your own experiences, or reminded you of the power of true love, please take a moment to hit that like button. It truly helps us share these stories with more people who need to hear them. We'd love to hear from you in the comments section below. Tell us, what moment in this story impacted you the most? Have you ever had to make an impossible choice between protecting someone you love and being honest with them? Do you believe in second chances? Your stories and perspectives make this community special, so please share your thoughts. If you found value in this story, please share it with friends, family, or anyone who needs a reminder that love can conquer even the darkest circumstances. You never know whose life might be changed by Eric and Stephanie's journey. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss our upcoming stories. We have so many more tales of love, redemption, hope, and triumph waiting for you, stories that will make you laugh, cry, think, and believe in the power of the human spirit. Coming up next, we have stories of unexpected reunions, impossible forgiveness, love that transcends time, and courage that changes everything. You won't want to miss a single one. Until next time, remember, it's never too late for love to find its way back home. It's never too late to fight for what matters. It's never too late for truth to set you free. Keep believing. Keep fighting. Keep loving. We'll see you in the next story.